Thank you for sticking with us this late in the afternoon. We're going to have kind of a casual conversation today, but excited to be joined by my colleagues here. We are going to really try to focus actually on a couple of topics that were not as explicit in the overview, but innovative approaches to advancing environmental justice, economic opportunity, and community engagement with the colleagues that have joined me here today. So as Ken said, my name is Alex Peterson. I am a principal with Summit Street Group and also direct projects for Jobs for the Future, which is a nonprofit that is leading workforce development efforts across the country. And I'm just excited to be here with y'all and learn as well. So with introductions, I'm gonna also ask you to answer our first questions, a bit wordy here, but why are environmental justice, economic inclusion, and community engagement important to you and your organizations?
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Kelly Watkins. I'm the Chief of Staff for the Environmental Protection Agency here in Region 8, which covers Colorado, Montana, Utah, Wyoming, North and South Dakota, as well as 28 tribes within that geographic area. So I've been with the agency, a little bit of background on me. I've been with the agency for 2 years now, as of yesterday, actually. And prior to that, I worked at the Colorado State Legislature for 10 years, 5 years as the Chief of Staff to the Speaker of the House. So interesting sort of different work in government on the state and legislative side, now on the federal and executive, and just happy to be here with you all today. So in terms of why environmental justice is important to our organization, the Environmental Protection Agency, it's a really critical, we see it as a critical sort of fundamental component of our mission, which is protecting human health and the environment. When you talk about environmental justice, you're really recognizing that there are communities that bear disproportionate burdens and impacts of pollution. So, you know, part of our mission, protecting human health and the environment, is ensuring that we are sort of recognizing the challenges that different communities face and doing what we can to try to address them. So it's something that President Biden and Administrator Regan have made a real cornerstone of our priorities for this administration. And it's something that we are shaping a lot of our work around and trying to integrate it into all of our different programs, all the work that we do, as well as really focusing on it in some of the grants work that is critical to what we're working on right now after the passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. I'll be talking about that in a bit, so I won't get into that more now, but thank you again. Look forward to the discussion.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jared Coleman, and I am a current executive board member for the American Society of Engineers, American Society of Civil Engineers, based out here in Denver. I'm also a past president of that organization, and I also happen to be a project engineer in the planning and engineering department for Aurora Water. So I focus mainly on development review in my day job, but I also work with the community as a part of ASCE in developing different actions and programs and engaging the community and keeping our membership engaged within their career fields and the very different career fields that you would see within civil engineering. So why community engagement is important to ASCE in particular is that we have a firm belief that diversity of backgrounds and opinions are going to have a direct impact on the solutions that are being provided within the communities themselves. So economic and environmental justice and inclusion are key when you engage your community directly and you engage your community within a broad spectrum. So you get people from different age groups, different backgrounds. All these things are going to distill into a comprehensive and direct policy that is going to directly affect the community that you're working in.
And hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. My name is Chris Callanan. I'm with the Denver Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. I work in external affairs in our equity division in the Office of Community and Business Engagement. Our office was created kind of a derivative of the North Denver Cornerstone Collaborative from a lot of the development work that was being kind of planned up in North Central Denver. And my background is in youth housing and homelessness, actually, really kind of working with government to kind of help shift bureaucracies in a way that would support youth experiencing homelessness because they are so unique in the services and wraparound services that they need in order to succeed. I found myself in this sector after my previous position because I'm kind of fascinated by the intersection between the need for really important infrastructure like affordable housing, like a lot of environmental and stormwater projects, balanced with the fact that they are generally deeply unpopular projects by adjacent homeowners, community members, and this kind of question about like how do you deliver projects while making sure that they are meeting community needs for habitability, environmental justice, all of these really important initiatives that we all do in our work, while mitigating the fact that a lot of times these projects that make spaces more habitable also end up creating market dynamics that push the folks who are meant to be served out of the benefits of the projects that are being delivered. So I work specifically with our project delivery administration and our project managers at Dottie to kind of work on those wraparound services that are paired with infrastructure that's being delivered, and really working on engaging community and making sure that their feedback is integrated.
Thank you. And we'll definitely come back to that and get into some of those specifics because there's some thorny projects right here in our backyard. So Kelly, to put you on the spot a little bit, you talked a little bit about the Biden administration and how all of these are critical priorities that are being rolled out. Is everything that your agency doing, top down, or what about grassroots, components to your investment here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you're talking about environmental justice, I think I would say it's both. There's a lot of grassroots efforts that have led to our focus on environmental justice. And then, from the top down, we've gotten very strong direction from, President Biden, as well as our EPA Administrator Regan, that EJ is something that we really need to be prioritizing in our work. And so, on the grassroots side, based on my experience in government, both at the state legislature and at the federal level, things don't just happen because somebody has a great idea or, a leader comes in and says like, yeah, I want to go put on this initiative. Like there's a lot of work that happens to elevate, the desire to focus on communities that have been disproportionately burdened with pollution. And so, we see that time after time, communities standing up and saying like, look, we need to be prioritizing our needs. You need to be talking with us as you're coming in to try to address issues. You need to be talking with us about what do those solutions look like? What do we want the future of our community to look like? You can't just, continue to sort of impose burdens on us by imposing a solution that you think is great, but you haven't talked to us about it. So definitely a lot of grassroots efforts there. But then on the flip side, coming from the top down, President Biden put forward an executive order on advancing environmental justice, including it's called the Justice 40 Initiative, which basically says that 40% at least of certain federal investments need to be having a benefit in disproportionately impacted communities. And so that included a number of our sort of core programs like drinking water SRF, state revolving fund, so drinking water programs, Superfund programs, some of our contamination cleanups. And then with the passage of those two major laws that I mentioned earlier and that I'm going to be mentioning again, a lot more money coming, out into communities across the country, and with, specific guidance about how much of that benefit how much we need to ensure is felt in disproportionately impacted communities. So it's really one of our sort of top 3 priorities at EPA right now is environmental justice and making sure that we are serving all of our communities in an equitable way.
If I can add to that, one thing that ASCE works on a lot too understands too, is that these things take time. So the grassroots efforts are incredibly vital, but we often don't see the results of all these efforts until many years down the road. The IIJA took decades of effort to try to get a fraction of what is actually truly needed. And when we look at infrastructure just in general, that infrastructure again takes time to plan, time to put in, time to see the effects of what is happening. And then oftentimes these problems don't arise until decades after the funding has gone and dried up, priorities and the political landscape shift. So it's incredibly important to continue to be involved with that community and realize again that, such as like the infrastructure report card from ASCE, that is a multi-year, multifaceted project that occurs yearly and changes every single time because again, the infrastructure is changing, the landscape is changing, and again, all the political whims and wills will change as well with that. So it is important to engage your communities and keep on top of these things.
Totally. And building on that, you've both mentioned IIJA. Like, what does EPA, see as the specific opportunities coming out of IIJA or BIL?
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to clarify, he referred to it as IIJA. No, that is also its name. But so when I'm talking about bill and IIJA, those are both the same thing. It's a bill that was passed, I think about 2 years ago, that invested a lot of money into infrastructure-related things. The lead service line replacement program was a big piece of that. There was funding for brownfields and Superfund cleanups, which are sites of varying levels of contamination that would be cleaned up and then redeveloped. There was money for clean school buses, trying to deploy electric and lower emission school buses throughout the country. And so we were really excited when that came about. We were like, oh my gosh, we have all this funding to do these great things. And then shortly after that, kind of in a surprising turn of events, there was the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed by Congress, which is even more money towards a broader range of programs, primarily focused around combating climate change. And so between the two laws, we have $100 billion that EPA is administering and trying to deploy out to the country on sort of a wide range of things. And so one of the key programs in the Inflation Reduction Act that I wanted to mention is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. It's a $27 billion, essentially revolving loan fund that's intended to help support the financing of clean energy projects to reduce emissions and see a lot of benefits across the country from combating climate change and cleaning up our air and water and things like that. So that was sort of the Congress's answer to the push for a green bank. So instead we got this $27 billion revolving loan fund that is gonna be working for many years to come. We've just announced sort of the first round of awards for that, and then that money is gonna start sort of getting out into the economy. So that's a really exciting one, and it's gonna rely a lot on the private sector to really sort of take up the mantle of this work and deploy those dollars. So that's something that I think might be of interest to many of you folks here.
Thanks. And at a local level, Jared, so not with the ACCE hat, but with the Aurora hat, promoting green space in challenged neighborhoods can be important in rectifying environmental contamination. And I guess this would apply to both of you, some of the projects you're working on. How do you see green space factor into your planning?
So within the city of Aurora, there's a couple of different processes that can incorporate parks and open space and green space. We all kind of, or at least from my perspective, they all kind of get lumped together. So we have our pros department, our parks, recreation, and open space department. And from the very beginning, someone said, woo, woo. So shout out to my pros people. So we have a couple of different processes. Usually what we see within residential development, redevelopment, even commercial, but generally master planned areas that are looking at several hundred acres. We have a certain percentage of green space that is set aside from the get-go. And these areas can be anything varied from your traditional parks to open greenways and beltways, areas next to creeks, open space that has been turned into like forested areas. It's really up to our pros people, our planning department, and the developer to look at these master planned areas and create a parks plan with connected trails, hopefully, regional trails, sub-regional trails, and even utilizing some of our detention areas for the community benefit, and trying to apply from a civil engineering planning perspective multiple uses for these areas. So the detention areas are also a key component of that. They now provide both detention as well as a community benefit. So from that perspective, we try to tailor each community to the needs of the community itself. And that is a joint effort between the private sector, the developers and the engineers, as well as the public sector that's going to kind of direct the overall development of the site.
And I think I will add, my academic background is political science, so it's a little different than planning and kind of engineering. And when I work specifically in the Globeville and Elyria-Swansea communities here in north central Denver. And one of the big reconstruction projects that I'm helping with technical assistance on is the Washington Street corridor reconstruction, which is a really important, main street boulevard that is being constructed for community benefit. And throughout the entire planning process for the project, we of course heard from community members, residents about the desire for green amenities, with the rise of the heat island effect and its disproportionate impact on communities that have not had these types of amenities through historical disinvestment. This is a huge priority for community members in the community engagement process. And that political science lens, the project team was very clear that it's going to be very hard to secure not the capital construction costs for those green amenities, but the actual maintenance. How are we going to, as a city, make sure that these green amenities that are being potentially installed are going to be maintained in perpetuity by community members? The bureaucracies, I would say, had have a decentralized architecture in the way that they both finance the capital construction costs for these green amenities, but also the maintenance. And the maintenance for a lot of the green amenities that are being installed by our department are really, it falls a lot on the community's ability to organize into special districts, business improvement districts, maintenance districts, which of course in equity communities is very challenging. There are a lot of different regulatory requirements that are paired with those entities, and to ask a group from an equity community to organize and kind of come forward with their own money in order to maintain these green amenities while basically holding back green infrastructure if that maintenance isn't settled by the community beforehand. Trying to figure out how to bust those bureaucratic barriers to green amenities and delivery of them is a huge opportunity, I think, for the city and county of Denver. And I am happy to say that we were able to organize and be responsive to community needs in GES.
Okay, I have about 3 questions and a comment as a follow-up to that. I'll try to pare it down. We were having a table conversation about this earlier today, though. We said if you can figure out how to make O&M sexy, that really fixes a lot of problems, because everyone wants to build it and no one wants to really take care of it or think about it on 30-year timeframes. But you mentioned the Washington Street corridor. We've talked a little bit about the National Western Center project and all of the challenges and opportunities that exist there. Are there other upcoming projects, Chris, that you think are set to make a real impact on equity or have a major environmental remediation component or avoid land use decisions that might carry negative environmental impacts? You can pick any part of that 3-part question.
I'll try to keep it a little brief, but the short answer is yes. I mean, there's a ton that Denver is looking into right now in terms of planning projects that really help mitigate the most extreme impacts to safety, health, well-being within equity communities. There is historical disinvestment in stormwater infrastructure that's being addressed through the Waterway Resiliency Project with our partners at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And there are the Washington Street project is being paired with probably, 10 or 15 different kind of stormwater improvement projects, including one of these kind of detention pond park amenity type improvements. And I think, our community planning and development department is really working in neighborhoods to identify these pain points, starting with our equity communities. And I think you're going to see a lot of that planning work, the pre-work that they're putting in, really informing Denver's infrastructure investments, especially to mitigate the most extreme impacts of climate change over the next, half century or so.
And more on the social side, because the environmental side, but on the social side, how are you thinking about maybe connecting future workers with construction or environmental remediation careers, or things that can involve people in their communities, provide that training? I know you've thought about this with ASCE as well, Jared, so it'd be great if you could hop in too.
Yeah, I think that this is a huge opportunity area for the department. In Denver, we have the Department of Economic Development, we have the Downtown Denver Partnership, we have Mile High Youth Corps, we have all of these, again, pretty decentralized groups working on workforce development initiatives that would even help with kind of the maintenance of these green amenities that might be installed. And how are we really kind of building up, training a workforce that is not necessarily, technically specialized through academic credentials, but how are we making sure that folks who are from equity communities can really be a part of and prosper from the infrastructure that's being delivered in their communities?
Yeah, and I can add on a little bit to that actually from a city side, because to your point, it's really hard to make O&M sexy, and unfortunately, we look at operation and maintenance for all of our infrastructure that we put in over the lifetime of the infrastructure, and usually well past the lifetime of the infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't serve its purpose if it's broken down. So it's unfair, it's unjust to put forth some kind of infrastructure that is not going to be maintained, or it's not going to be easy to maintain for the community that's going to maintain it. Because as much as private development would love the city to take over all maintenance responsibility, that's just unfortunately not possible. So we try to, at the city, make it as easy as possible for private entities, usually this is going to be a metro district or your HOA, to maintain this infrastructure so that it continues to provide its function throughout its life, and usually well beyond its service life, mainly because looking at trying to retrofit or fix a problem in the future is, as I'm sure many of us are aware, exponentially more costly than trying to fix it up front or maintaining a lower maintenance cost over the lifetime of the infrastructure.
And I also realized I did this to myself, where I'm now going to have the song. Has everyone seen, or anyone seen, the Denver Water commercial, the Backstreet Boy thing? Yeah, in my head immediately started going, was that a Backstreet Boys song? Was that an NSYNC song? You guys have not seen this yet. Okay, you've seen it. 50-50, everyone's seen it. Okay. I mean, you say that in like an average environment and everyone would probably blank stare at you. You don't say that at a bar, but I feel like that's a pretty safe question to ask. Has everyone seen the Denver Water commercial in this room? It's gonna be a positive response. So kind of just moving us through a little bit, and this is actually from the ASCE perspective, or asking you again, Jared, from the ASCE perspective, what mechanisms exist for contractor and subcontractor evaluation processes? So really getting in there.
From an ASCE perspective.
Oh, okay. If you want to answer from Aurora, that's fine. But being a driver of inclusion in the private sector when going after public funds, essentially.
So from an ASCE perspective, and just inclusion, I'm going to go back to our involvement within the community directly itself, and involvement within our report card efforts for our state. It's a 4-year effort in which we essentially poll our entire collective community of civil engineering members from all different backgrounds, all different ages, from academia, from the private sector, from the public sector, and we truly try to get that cross-section of the entire local community of civil engineers to help inform, again, the policy and procedures moving forward. And this is something that the governor pays attention to, legislators pay attention to. We're seen as a nonpartisan organization that can be of experts that can be trusted and relied upon to give unbiased facts to inform future policy, and that's just at the state level. On the national level, that occurs as well. It's just obviously a much bigger thing. It contributed significantly to the passage of the IIJA. Again, a 1.3 trillion with a T dollar bill that, in most cases for these people, for everyone here that's a civil engineer, is probably going to see a slice of that money in order to benefit your community. And things like environmental justice Clean Air and Water Acts and policies. Those are baked into that policy, into that law, and it all started because we engaged our community.
Thank you. So Kelly, it kind of builds on the grassroots component of that, but with project selection, what are some of the toughest barriers to getting equity-driven projects on the agenda, and what resources do communities have to push these critical projects, have or need?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say one of our biggest challenges is just there is so much that we're trying to accomplish here. There's so much money to get out the door in grants. And there's a lack of awareness. People, I think, get overwhelmed with how many different agencies are reaching out about things, or they may not, be on our communication channels. So lack of awareness, but then I think even more critically than that, lack of capacity. We hear frequently from local governments, tribes, even from some of the states in our region that, look, we are overwhelmed. The same person that would be writing this grant application is the same person that's managing 3 other departments and doesn't have time to do this, much less than manage the grant if we were to receive it. And so, we recognize that that's a challenge, particularly for communities that are overburdened. They are dealing with a lot and often are not adequately resourced to be able to just sort of easily drop everything to apply for a complex federal grant. And so one of the things that we're doing to try to help address that is we've set up a part of the laws that were passed, set up a network of technical assistance centers. We're calling them TIC-TACs because we love acronyms in the federal government. And what they're there to do is they'll take in questions from pretty much anybody, community members, community groups, state governments, local governments, et cetera, and they can help identify funding opportunities that might be of interest to address whatever issues they're saying that they need help with. They can then help teach people how to apply for a federal grant, how to do that effectively, and then how to manage a grant effectively. And then they can also help with partnership building. A lot of these grants require partnerships between different types of organizations, and so helping them with that stage of it as well. We're really hoping that these can be a one-stop shop, and they're not limited to EPA grants either. It's across the federal government. They're supposed to be helping advise, based on the issue that you're describing, this is what you might look at, and we'll help you get there. So I think that's going to be, we are hoping that these will be a real game changer. I'm really excited about it. Ours is about to get up and running in the very near future. And so can't wait to see how that helps with helping communities across the country, and particularly in Region 8, because that's where I work, capitalize on this really historic and transformational investment.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we have just a few minutes left, so rapid fire kind of wrap up, starting with you, Chris, and working our way down the line. Top actions that we need to take now to advance equity and infrastructure, and if you can, how can public and private sector team more effectively for inclusive projects?
I think wraparound services that are paired with infrastructure that's being delivered, one of the biggest risks to our projects these days are really the kind of political, social backlash that can come with projects being delivered. So how are we really kind of softening the impact to community through delivery?
Yeah, I think communication is key. So communication between the private sector and the public sector very early on, I think, is going to really alleviate a lot of the issues that you run into later down the chain of the design and construction. So engaging the community, but also realizing that we're all partners. We're all partners in this together. We all want a project to succeed, and try to take a less adversarial approach to things.
And I think for our perspective, for EPA, our biggest thing right now is getting these Bill and IRA dollars out, deployed in communities, and starting to create, tangible impacts for people. And so what I would say for sort of all of you, I would say get read up on what these investments are going to entail, because there's a lot of work that's going to have to be done in partnership with the private sector, between getting supply chains up and running for a lot of these renewable energy solutions, getting workforce trained and ready to help with the transition, et cetera. Those are some of the sort of key things that I think we're all going to have to work together to get these out the door and making real impacts.
Perfect. That's it. So thank you guys so much for sharing your perspectives with us. I took copious notes, so helpful for me. Back to you.
Thank you.